Hello, I am back to review another game. It's been a long time, but yeah, obviously with the pause and due to you know what, it's been very obviously difficult to talk about football in real time. So I decided to do a review on the Atletico Madrid-Barcelona game, which I think was an important game to talk about now that most leagues, the title has been decided or the season has been ended either by formality in the sense of the Ligue 1 or in the Bundesliga or the Premier League in the sense that the title is already won to a team that we don't know and we don't mention on this channel. So yeah, so La Liga and Serie A as well, more so, let's say, are basically areas of discussion now, provide us a real scope for discussion in terms of football and title race and excitement, and obviously the Champions League in the next month. So the Barcelona-Atletico game was a very interesting game. It's always a game that's always cagey, conflicting ideologies and styles of play, philosophies, mentality, mindsets, individualism versus solidarity and resistance. And this game did not fail to disappoint, but not on the footballing side. I'd say this game will be known forever down in the annals of Spanish football for its controversy. The game was fraught with controversy from the start to finish. So the game did end. Let's just talk about the game in general. A summary of the game. The game did end in a 2-2 draw. Barcelona scored from thanks to an own goal via Diego Costa from a Messi's corner. Then within less than 5 minutes, I think, or so, Atletico Madrid equalized with the penalty. That's, again, we'll talk about it. It was a contentious one. Then Barcelona scored again with another penalty, which was a significant penalty because Messi scored his 700th career goal. In quite some style, with some panache, with a nice panenka, tribute to Pirlo in Euro 2012. And then Atletico Madrid then scored from another spot kick, and then the game basically ended there. I think it was honours even. So the penalty was a very interesting one. I think we'll talk about the first goal that Atletico Madrid scored. And the penalty was contentious in the first place because okay, there was contact, albeit minimal, by Vidal on Carrasco, but that's not the main point of contention, really. The main point of contention was the fact that after Diego Costa took his penalty, which was saved by Ter Stegen, the referee via VAR asked for the penalty to be retaken, and Saul this time took it and scored. The reason why it had to be the referee wanted to retake the penalty was because Ter Stegen came off his line, and so the referee adjudged Ter Stegen to be off his line. And if you look at the replay, it's quite a pedantic thing to do, to say the least, because he didn't actually move forward. He dived forwards, if that makes sense. So he didn't like step out and dived. He actually dived like that, if that makes sense. So like he dived in front. So he obviously started in position, jumps off his line, and then dives forward rather than moves and then dives. So it was very harsh, I think, to be perfectly honest. If you're going to look at if VAR is going to have a role in terms of retaking penalties based on the kind of margins of error, stepping out of line, transgressing the boundary, transgressing that line, as you're going to do with the offside, it needs to be consistent, but it needs to be very clear as well. So a lot of people are a bit aggrieved on Twitter. I saw it didn't make sense, and of course it was a bit implausible. I mean, otherwise the penalty of Liverpool wouldn't have won the Champions League because Dudek came out of his line, and he does that, and he did that so many times. Dida as well does that all the time. He always came out of his line in the Champions League final against Juventus on penalties. So maybe AC Milan would have won the Champions League in 2005, and Juventus would have won the Champions League in 2003. So if you do look at, if you go back in history and try and apply this to significant matches, to key matches, it will have a huge change in history. So it was quite, what I'm trying to say is quite extraordinary from the referee to kind of be perhaps the first to use for VAR for the first time in a penalty, to retake a penalty based on the fact that the goalkeeper moved not even a centimetre out off his line, but rather dived forwards. If that makes sense, but it's quite weird. I mean, obviously you wouldn't expect things like that in football, but then again, VAR is becoming more and more pedantic and more nitpicky and focused on the littlest things, even though where it really matters, or where really VAR is meant to have a say, it doesn't. And we'll talk about that in the second penalty when again, another situation with Messi, with the Barcelona's penalties. That's again, Semedo was taken down by Felipe. Again, there was minimal contact. Some would say that's not really a penalty. I mean, the contact was very faint. I don't even think that was actually. Perhaps there was just, a vacuum between, the thinnest of vacuums between foot and leg. But both of them were trying to get the ball anyway, and I think he slightly, basically clipped. So Felipe clipped Semedo in the process of trying to get the ball, clear the ball out, or take the ball off from Semedo. So again, was that a penalty? If you're gonna look at black and white and letter to the law and etc., and look at with the magnifying glass, i.e. by proxy VAR, yeah, it would be a penalty, but it's very, very harsh. I mean, I've seen them not given, basically, with or without VAR. And then obviously that led to the significant moment, because Messi scored his 700th career goal, and now him and Ronaldo are basically in the upper tiers, in the upper echelons of football history, where nobody has scored more than 700 career goals. Well, some might say Pele, but that involves a lot of friendly games. So anyway, I don't want to have, I'm not a historian, and I don't want to have a revisionist take on things in terms of changing Champions League results, or changing, adjusting Pele's goal tally. So yeah, it was a nice Panenka down the middle, not as high as Pirlo's. I think Pirlo's is perhaps the most brazen of them all, because he did it in the Euros and nobody did something like that, and it was sudden death as well. He just went. Whereas Messi was a bit more controlled, a bit more tamed, but nonetheless impressive, I have to say. And then we talk about the third penalty, and this is perhaps the most contentious of them all, where if VAR really focuses on the smallest of things like that, into the goalkeeper's positioning and coming off his line by the faintest, if not most negligible of margins, you would have to say that this is a bit more clear and manifest, and a bit more blatant, and very, very problematic of VAR now, because what we're seeing is, in this situation, let me provide some context, is that Semedo was adjudged to have taken Carrasco down. Carrasco took the ball on the counter, as he did throughout this game, and he was fantastic. We'll talk about him in a minute. Man of the match, definitely so. But if you look at it, Semedo barely doesn't even touch Carrasco in the process of him completing his counter into the box. But Carrasco, actually, if you look into it, Carrasco trips up, he clips his own heel, and he falls. But the referee, from a very far distance, I must say, assumed that actually Semedo tripped up Carrasco, who stumbled and then fall. But if you look at VAR does not actually see that at all. We see that actually Semedo was nowhere near him. That actually Carrasco went over as Semedo approached, got his foot out. Carrasco went over it, and in the process he stumbled and clipped his own heel and stumbled and then fell. Referee assumed that actually it was because of Semedo's foot that there was contact, and that led to a delayed, a bit of a stumble and then the eventual fall. Very contentious, and VAR, and actually the referee didn't even consult with VAR. As soon as he said it was penalty, it was a penalty. I think there is this reluctance, as we're seeing in the Premier League as well, that for referees in the booth room, in the kind of VAR room, if you like, the VAR referee, unwilling to correct the referee's decision. Even though in Serie A we see the interesting thing where actually after the referee has made a decision 3 or 4 minutes later, we're seeing the referee actually go to the screen and review after being told that you need to check actually again because we're not really convinced with your decision. Check it. So it's not really correct in saying no, you're wrong, give the award the decision or penalty, whatever. In Serie A, what we're seeing is actually a delayed response, which is not nice. It's very frustrating because it does disrupt the flow of the game, and the momentum for the side who's got the ball, or who's kind of escaped from, let's say, benefiting the side that's not being penalized, and them, and he kind of, the referee is on, is being told on the earphone, to check it, goes to the screen and looks at it again. That delay and that bureaucracy around coming to a decision is not nice. But then again, in Spain and in the UK, what we're seeing is actually a decision's being made. VAR will say, okay, you've made that decision, we're not going to intervene, and that's it. Where there's uncertainty from the referee's point of view, we then you hear VAR have an input. So to summarize, VAR in the UK and Spain seems to be some sort of check and balance, some sort of support mechanism to whose intervention really relies solely on clarifying any doubt. Whereas in Italy, it's a bit more slow. Actually, it says tells the referee to let the game go, let the game flow, continue, and then if we have any updates, we'll let you know. You then revisit the screen, and then make a decision. So it's a bit delayed, a bit staggered, but at least there is some sort of decision-making process, if you like. Whereas the other one, it's quite impulsive and immediate, and there's this kind of sense of unwillingness to make the referee look bad or indecisive or incapable of managing the game, which somewhere in between is a bit nice. I think if you try and make the decision a bit quick without trying to make the referee look too bad, advise him to consult the screen. Obviously this then introduces the discussion of whether we should have screens at the pitch now on the fourth side, on the fourth official's side. Should there be a screen there for the fourth official to look at, to then consult, to relay that to the referee, or somewhere in some sort of centralized booth far away to tell the referee that regardless, some sort of information, referee then stops the game in real time. We're talking about, not like in Italy where we're talking about 5 minutes later, and then makes a decision. It looks at the screen and then makes a decision. And then acts accordingly. So this is what we're trying to say, that there is some sort of, the implementation of VAR is at best contrived and misaligned with the game, with the spirit of the game. That's how I'll put it down. That's what I'll put it down to, which leads to very incredulous and spurious at times decision making. So incredulous in the sense that, oh my god, I can't believe that's not a penalty, that's a penalty. And spurious is just outright wrong, which we've seen here. Outright wrong. Incredulous in the sense with Testega coming out of his line, and that then obviously him being booked and having the penalty retaken, even though we looked at VAR and he dived forward, he didn't jump, didn't walk or move forward, and then anyways. Or spurious in the sense that Carrasco is tripping up on his own heel as a result of Semedo's leg, even though Semedo does not contact Carrasco. Was outright, that's a misinterpretation, misunderstanding of the events, and that led to a spurious decision in terms of awarding the penalty in favour for Barcelona, in which there should not have been a penalty in the first place. So that's how I would see things. So this is the main point of contention in a game that was quite cagey anyway, as it always is with Atletico Madrid trying to disrupt the flow. A bit of kicking and a bit of fouling and some some histrionics as well, some sort of theatrics. So I wanted to talk less. There was not really much tactical stuff, but as you know, that Barcelona under Setien is a bit more expansive. So even more productive, more creative on the ball. Rather than circulating the ball round and round, they try and pass it. They try and probe and run and penetrate and attempt to penetrate. But this then leaves the and they do this with a very high line with the two centre backs slightly back behind their own half, and then the centre defensive mid in Busquets, and then the left and right back, the lateral positions pushed up a lot higher, which creates a problem, which I think, you know, we saw a lot in, I saw a lot in this game with Carrasco's runs, these kind of amazing runs, these kind of hazard-esque runs, even though they're from the same country. And you know, I don't want to make that comparison, sorry, but they are like hazard-esque runs, you know, these amazing runs into the, not out wide like a Willian, or out wide and then in, as we see with many players, traditional positions. We're seeing actually these players kind of amazing runs into the box diagonally and directly, and we saw that a lot with Carrasco because there was so much space opened up for him on Piqué's half, on Piqué's side, and his I forgot his name, and Semedo, yes, and Semedo. There was so much space, so much distance between the two, that it provided, you know, an outlet for the likes of Saul and Partey, who had a quiet game compared to their previous fixture, or the reverse fixture in December and November, both games actually, in terms of the cup in Saudi Arabia and also the league game where they lost 1-0 to a Messi last minute Messi curler, typical fashion. Provided an outlet for Carrasco, who has actually made a difference. I mean, we know Matt Carrasco has been much maligned throughout history as this kind of misunderstood player who has not fulfilled his own potential, basically. Promising at Atletico Madrid, then went to, I believe, Monaco, and he kind of was, you know, I'm not sure if I can remember. Yeah, he was at Monaco, yeah, I think so, and he was kind of pushed aside due to the brilliance of Mbappe and et al. He went to China, and obviously going to China might make sense as you're finishing your career, at the twilight of your career, but in your formative years it's perhaps not the best move. So it kind of pushed him further out of the radar, made him even more under the radar. So when he came back to Atletico Madrid in January, it was met with a lot of derision because, well, this guy's like kind of unfulfilled talent. Are we that desperate to bring him back? There's so many better players, and he's quite old now, you know, he's past his prime. But really, against Barcelona, he really impressed me a lot. The amazing runs, the penetrative runs, the probing runs into the box, you know, capitalizing on the distance, but also on Piqué's lack of positioning in general and pace, and Semedo's willingness to go up so forward and reluctance to defend his own territory made it a field day for Carrasco, who was very impressive. Maybe perhaps exaggerated his performance, let's just say, in the sense that it made him better than he really is, or made him perform better than he than reality would suspect. So Carrasco's runs were very impressive. I thought he made a huge difference, carrying the ball very well, leading the counter really, and sustaining the attacks that Atletico Madrid have, albeit very limited as usual. They kind of make the most of what they have, very resourceful as they are. But also in set pieces, in the first 2 minutes of the game, Atletico Madrid were very direct, and they got and they had a couple of set plays, one of which almost led to a goal. Carrasco's in-swinger was unfortunately not met by Jimenez's header. He kind of slightly mistimed the header just by a fraction of a second or two, and then, you know, but the in-swinger itself was close enough to trouble ter Stegen, who felt that it was necessary to dive towards his post in case that the ball was going to kind of creep in, but it's just a whisker away. It was tantalizingly close at best. So Carrasco was very impressive, provided a lot of energy, and then obviously it was nice, very good idea for Simeone to take him off towards the end and bring on a fresh player, like substitution, if you like, in the sense of Lemar, who came on and almost scored the goal, skilled up the goalkeeper, but was then pushed out too wide in a 1v1 situation, and then laid it back to João Felix, I think, and then was intercepted by Alba. So so definitely Atletico Madrid trying to make the use of actually using this kind of expansionist version of Barcelona football, tiki-taka football, if you like. I mean, whether it's tiki-taka or not, I don't know. It's a topic for another day. But the main point is that Barcelona are a lot open at the back compared to the Valverde days, where they're a lot more compact and perhaps too conservative on the ball. Here they're a bit more expansive, and passing around, trying to probe, and look for spaces to penetrate. Although this has kind of bypassed the midfield quite a lot, they tend to go out wide and then in. So the midfield is there as a kind of block, really, to prevent any counter-attacks or counter-pressing, which would then lead to a counter-attack. But it's not as direct basically as a Valverde in short. So yeah, another thing that I wanted to highlight in a game that was really not was not really the best of games in a tactical point of view or an entertainment point of view. I mean, it did befit the occasion in the sense that there were no fans, and honestly, with no fans, it did make the game, it did not really hurt the performance as much. I think with the fans, I think it would perhaps create a bit more impetus, yes, in the game and the energy, but I don't think, I think many fans would be very bored and put off by this kind of, end of season testimonial kind of vibe of a game. But given the circumstances in terms of the pandemic, it kind of makes sense that everyone's just trying to get themselves acclimatized to the demands of the game, although perhaps that's a bit too costly for Barcelona, who as a result of this performance are a point behind Real Madrid, with Real Madrid having already played a game in hand. That means that if Real Madrid beat Getafe, I believe today, or at the time of this recording, they'll be 4 points ahead, and I can't see Real Madrid dropping that many points really to lose the title. So I do think that this game really was a concession of defeat in Barcelona's eyes, really. I think I can't see Barcelona winning, and I don't know what this really means in terms of the future. Whether Setien stays, his Eder Sarabia, his second assistant, is quite a controversial character, who's too big for his own boots, let's just say, kind of quite imposing and quite assertive, perhaps playing the manager role more than the manager himself, who's a bit more mellow and laid back. So it's quite an interesting dynamic to see. But yeah, what does that mean for Quique Setien's position? We don't know. We have to wait and see the champ in what may come, as the season's not over yet, and he has been given assurances that he will still stay for the next season. He will see out through his contract. But again, we're hearing discussions from journalists, from esteemed journalists, that maybe Xavi might come a lot earlier than expected for the Champions League games, and so that he can start managing the Champions League game to give Barcelona perhaps a better chance of winning. But I don't know how that works in Barcelona. Barcelona is not really a team where you have like a Chelsea, where you bring a manager halfway through the season and it's immediate, like a Conte or like a Gus Hiddink in 2009. No, Gus Hiddink, 2008. Sorry, 2008. After where they had that surge of, I think they won 22 games out of 23, and that 23rd game they drew against Tottenham or something like that, and they won the FA Cup. Or the likes of Di Matteo coming in halfway through a season, winning the Champions League and the FA Cup. So it's not like a Chelsea. Barcelona, it's a team that likes to take its time. It needs to sow the seeds, wait for it to germinate, and find the right soil, and it's a very slow process, and unfortunately time is against them with the pandemic. Games are coming in thick and fast. There's really no time, there's no room for error, there's no room for defeat, there's no room for everything's up the ante basically. So it's a very difficult time for Barcelona, I think, and whether Xavi will be able to come, having already been a legend that he is, having already been aware of being cognizant of the history of the club and the style, maybe the management will become the perfect role for him. He'll come to it like Dr. Water. We don't know. I mean, he's managed El Cid, and El Cid is not the same as Barcelona. I mean, Barcelona's goals, you can achieve the number of goals that you can Barcelona achieve in a season, which is like around 150. You can perhaps get that in one game in El Cid if you really make the effort. Let's just say, although there's not really much effort to be made in that league. Let's be honest. I mean, you can be top goal scorer within a game. So I don't know how it works. But I just wanted to highlight, if you want, for a tactical point of view, before I end this video, for today. There was an interesting battle between Messi, Semedo, between Lodi on one hand and Messi, Semedo and Vidal, who are making this kind of triangle, this kind of axis of attacking Lodi's side, which is, I believe, if I look at the pitch, I think it's the left hand side, if I'm correct. Yeah, I think it's the left hand side, because Lodi again plays similar to Semedo, like Marcelo, very advanced, this kind of Luciferic style of wing backs, very high up, Portuguese Brazilian, for those who don't understand what Luciferic is, very high up, very bombarding, very relentless, bombarding those spaces, but not really willing to defend. This is kind of a common thing that we're seeing, maybe a stereotype if at worst that we're seeing. So again, what we're seeing is that Setien positioned on the attack, encouraged, so that Messi doesn't have much of a, to make it easy for Messi, so that he doesn't engage in duels and he's not distracted and pulled out, is that we have someone like Vidal, we have Semedo carrying the ball, Vidal, Messi making his kind of, saunters. I don't know, they're not really runs, but they're not really walks, they're like between like a saunter or a jog or a gallop, a little gallop, takes his time basically, into the right hand side of the box, waits for the likes of Semedo to approach, waits for Lodi to run into Semedo, he will then lay it off to Messi, and then if needed Vidal will then be on that side just to circulate the ball in case there's a packing or there's an extra man on Messi. But what we saw actually, that Lodi read the ball very well, read the game very well. I think this is something that was instilled on Simeone, definitely, because in the previous games we saw Lodi out of position and being substituted or benched as a result. By half time, if not by the 55th minute, as we've seen in instances. So Lodi's really matured, this is what I want to say, because he actually dropped a lot back. So as soon as Semedo was coming, he dropped a lot back, and then Carrasco would then try and get the ball, as he did many times, because he would press Semedo, who's not really fast on the ball but is very adventurous, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So what would happen is that you wouldn't see Lodi coming in head first, diving in the shallow end. You'd actually see him pin himself back, allow space for Carrasco to collect the ball, and then the overlap would then begin in the counter-attack. To sustain it, he would then overlap him, etc. So we saw that, and we then saw instances of his defensive capabilities as well, in which Lodi actually would tackle, would intercept the ball, would read the movement of Semedo so well that he actually would himself not go in gung-ho, but he would pin and then know when to get the ball, dispossess Semedo and go. If not, actually, if he's pinned himself too back or Semedo's had too much time on the ball and he releases it to Vidal, he then goes to his left-hand side and clears Vidal out, who is hugging the touchline. So we do see these things, we do see a sense of maturity and a positional awareness that zonally speaking, because he's he's pinning himself back, allowing Semedo to occupy the territory, and then either Carrasco swoops it or he will get it himself. He'll be able to have enough time to make a better judgment to then intercept or dispossess Semedo. As I said, there are also alternatives in which he pins himself so deep, so back. Vidal has it, and because Vidal's slow on the ball and he tends to just release it immediately, he doesn't like to hold the ball too much, Semedo will then cut his passing lines to between him and Messi, and then go on the counter. We've seen, and then we've seen also with Messi, he's a bit more physical. With Messi, it's a bit easier for him because he can really get to him and be a bit more physical. As Vidal and Semedo, either if he's too physical with Semedo, he will lose his position, or with Vidal, he will be out-muscled by him. So is this kind of triangulation that, or these kind of triangulating responses to the axis that Setien tried to impose on, or enact on rather, because based on his weaknesses, was actually a weakness of Barcelona's and was seen to be a strength for Semedo, with the support of Carrasco, but usually based on his maturity and initiative. So that was a very interesting tactical battle, and it's nice to see the imprints of Simeone on a new player, and who's really conducted himself very well, very, very good. Obviously in the second half was a bit different, because with so much spaces opening up with Barcelona back Semedo became a bit more, let's say, impatient and not willing to play that kind of game. I think there was a tactical change as well from Barcelona's side as well, where they had just only Messi, I think, and Semedo. Vidal was pushed towards the middle, playing the kind of Fellaini role, or as Van Gaal say, the Fulani role, or Fellaini role. Yeah, a bit more direct down the middle. So it was 2v1, which was 2v1, which was okay, slightly easier, but obviously you have the movements of Messi, which was quite the dazzling movements, which would obviously put Semedo off. So he would have more support from Saul or from Carrasco, but Carrasco was pushed a lot inwards anyway for the counter attack to kind of actually challenge, rather than actually start from a how would I say this? Gosh, start from a distant starting position on the counter. Actually, he told him to push in a lot, actually, so that would make it easy for you to actually go through the to initiate the counter. So actually, the starting position for the counter actually became a lot more closer, a lot more inverted, a lot more inwards rather than outwards as it was in the first half, because they realized actually, Piqué is not really that good. He's lost of form, not really confident, and perhaps there's more, he's not comfortable in his own, playing the high line that high perhaps, or not rather the high line, but playing with so much space, so much distance, so much gaps between him and the fullback, or between him and the centre back. So yeah, very interesting. So just to capitalize on the spaces, the kind of gaping holes or the creaking holes that were starting to emerge, time in, time out, constantly throughout. So yeah, that was really the interesting thing. So the battle was really Barcelona's right-hand side and Atletico Madrid's left-hand side. Yeah, I hope I got that right. I'm not very good with my orientation, because I do read the game. I try and position myself. I'm not very good with orientation. I'm not a very visual thinker when it comes to, so I have to either write it down or look and see. So if I got the orientation completely inverted, or it's flipped on its axis, I apologize. I'm not the best when it comes to it. I was like, I have to go like, that's not right. I always do that with the screen. I have to either turn my head. Anyway, yeah, I'm just digressing. But the main battle was on the lateral side, on Barcelona's right and Atletico's left. Might be the other way around. Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. As long as the main players are, you've got the name of the players there. But yeah, I think Saul played. Man of the match was definitely Carrasco. Saul played very well. Partey was silent. Didn't play a major role. Not making those advancing runs or those kind of incisive passes as he usually does, and he did so well in the reverse fixture. Today he was a bit pinned back, dealing with the likes of De Jong, of Rakitic, and then Vidal moving towards the middle in the second half for the more direct approach, and to supplement Suarez, who was dealt well with by Jimenez. So, and Felipe, for Jimenez, Felipe was on the other side. So it was not a really, tactical, massive, revolutionary tactical game. It was befitting of the occasion. It did reflect the lockdown. This was a lockdown game. It was a testimonial at best and lockdown at worst kind of game. A game that had to be played, basically. Obviously, if we could go back in time, we wouldn't want this game to be played under these current conditions. So yeah, it was not the best game, but out of that there was controversy around the penalty. There was controversy around the penalty, the 3 penalties. First being ter Stegen being booked and having the penalty retaken because he kind of transgressed his line, even though replays suggest via VAR, he actually dived forward, if that makes sense. He didn't actually move forward. He, after his after his goalkeeping position, jumps and then dives forwards. But yeah, and then the second one being that the contact was very faint. In fact, Felipe clipped Semedo as he was trying to clear the ball or get the ball off him, but the contact was so faint. It honestly felt like he created like a gust of air, a bit of a vacuum between the two, and just like that air. Then I don't know, some sort of Naruto crap. I don't know, and there was like a gust of wind. But the way he did it, it was quick. In real time, it was so quick it's hard to tell. But it looked like he didn't even touch him, and if so, it was so faint that it's barely negligible to the human eye, to the naked eye. But yeah, that's perhaps the most penalty worth. Actually, The first one was a penalty incident, but the retake was unnecessary. It was not right. It was not fair. The second one is a bit harsh. I mean, you've seen them given and you've seen them not given, and VAR was not really clear. I think, again, once the referee made a decision, VAR didn't want to correct the referee and make him look bad, especially in a game like this where it would look like he's lost the game and he's not managed it properly, etc. So there is some sort of politics around that, some sort of vested interests in that. But yeah, the second one was very harsh. I mean, when I look at it, it didn't look like a penalty, but you've seen them given. The third one was very harsh. I think Semedo comes in, obviously trying to get the ball. Carrasco, goes over him, but in the process, as he lands, he then clips his own heel and then stumbles. Referee from afar deems it as sees it as a penalty. I can't even speak. Sees it to be a penalty. It's not a penalty. Again, VAR does not really intervene. Only VAR intervenes when there is uncertainty. So once the referee makes a decision, there is no VAR. Once the referee is like, I'm not sure, or I think I missed something, I've got a bit of a hunch, or have I missed something, consult with the booth, with the referees in the booth. Yeah, fine, the booth. That came to my mind. The VAR referees, then he makes a decision. But I think that's obviously problematic. VAR is meant to be there to correct, to provide, not only to provide assurances, but to correct referees' indiscretions, especially ones that are grossly and patently unfair, as we've seen with the Carrasco penalty, the final penalty, and obviously the tactical battles between Carrasco and the tag team of Carrasco and Lodi against Messi, Semedo and Vidal. It was more Semedo and Vidal. Messi is basically, if you think about it, in WWE terms, you'd have Carrasco and Lodi, and then you'd have their opponents being Vidal and Semedo, but Messi would be like a manager, because he was not there really involved in the battle. He was there actually as the end product. Obviously, he was there to provide him with space, and then for him to have more time on the ball. So it was not him actually battling with his players, but there were instances where when the ball did get to Messi, Lodi was then able to outmuscle him, obviously led to fouls and etc. So yeah, that's the game in the whole. In sum, whether this means Setien will see through his contract, I don't know. Obviously, he's gonna, the title race seems to be all but over, in the sense that Real Madrid, if they beat Getafe today, which is very likely based on their form, it will be 4 points. They'll be 4 points ahead, and I can't see, with 6 games to go, I can't see but Real Madrid dropping that many points. I mean, they might drop points, but I don't think they'll drop more than 3 points. And Barcelona, I think they will drop points along the way, based on the lack of confidence and the fact that having drawn 4 out of their last 5 games, definitely they are a team to be challenged and that can be easily unsettled. And there is a bit of tension, as I said, with the between management. Eder Serabri has kind of over-imposing, outspoken, direct, very overly assertive role, and Quique Setien's kind of nonchalance and insouciance, just taking it, not really trying to get involved. And obviously the likes of Messi, Rakitic and Suarez and Alba, who are really peed off by that kind of overbearing approach, provocative approach, let's just say. Yeah, so there are lots of tensions at play. The signing of Pjanic does not help. I think obviously he's there to provide some sort of short-term relief to the books, but in terms of footballing style, they got De Jong there, they got Messi there technically for the set pieces, De Jong there in the position that Pjanic occupies. I don't really know if this was necessary, but I think they just did it, as I said, for the money. I don't know. The future does look it looks very stressful, and it's tough. And whether Xavi comes in or not, the manager for next season, assuming that Quique Setien will leave and will not see through his contract, has a mountain to climb, basically. What's next for me? Well, Premier League is over, as I said at the start. Bundesliga is over. French League, there was no French League. Was there even a French League in the first place? Not talking about lockdown, I'm talking about the league itself. I mean, is that really a league? Answers in a postcard, please. The next game I will review is actually in a month's time, I think. Yeah, no, not in a month's time, in 3 weeks' time, where I'll be reviewing, perhaps in more detail than this kind of waffle and this kind of summaries of events, the title deciding match, I think, which is Lazio versus Juventus. Currently they are a point, Juve is a point ahead of Lazio, and there's, I think, 10 games to go. Yeah, 10 games to go. Yeah, so really it's gonna go down the wire. I think Inter have a game in hand, I believe, so if they beat, I think it's Brescia today, they'll be 4 points behind Lazio, and obviously then, is it 4 points behind Lazio? It'll be 4 points behind Juve, and then, yeah, I think Juve have a game, no, Juve had the game in hand, yeah, so I think they'll be around 4 to 5 points behind the title between the two teams, but yeah, if they lose, I think they'll be 8 points behind. Yeah, this is what I've got. Yeah, so we shall see how that fares, but it's looking very interesting, very contentious, but very, very enthralling. Much better than Serie A Liga, much better than La Liga. I was mixing the two together. My mind sometimes is ahead of my speech. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting game, and we'll see how that will pan out. And yeah, that will be on the 20th of July. I'll do the video on the 21st of July, and we'll see how that goes. And I think that will perhaps be, because I'm more engaged with the Serie A than I am with the La Liga, I'll be able to provide a bit more context. So yeah, but anyway, to end this video, this was the Barcelona v Atletico Madrid game that took place yesterday on the 30th of June. The game ended 2-2. 3 goals were penalties. One of them was a retake, and one was an own goal from by Diego Costa from a Messi corner. As a result of this, Barcelona will be 4 points behind if Real Madrid beat Getafe tonight, and basically that will decide, in my opinion, the title race. Will conclude the title race. Sorry, and basically Barca have a lot to deal with in terms of internal politics, and both on the field and off the field situations, and we shall see how that will end for them in terms of what this means for them in the Champions League, in terms of whether they get a new manager, how will they perform, whether this form will translate into the Champions League, and what does this mean for the next season as well, which is around the corner if you think about it. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and like, comment and subscribe, and there'll be more content coming out through in the following months. All the best, take care, and bye.